And shifting focus to developments on Russia-Ukraine war front, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict now is, in fact, it has surpassed 1,000 days along, and what remains a focal point of global concern are the escalating tensions between the two nations. Recent U.S. support for Ukraine to strike deep into Russian territory has intensified the situation, drawing some very, very sharp responses from Moscow. Our next report brings us all the details.
It's been more than 1,000 days since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began dominating global discourse. Amid growing fears of escalation, the U.S. Embassy temporarily closed operations in Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, after receiving specific intelligence about a potential significant air attack. This development follows the United States' decision to allow Ukraine to strike targets deep inside Russia using American-made weapons. Ukraine recently targeted a Russian weapons arsenal in the Bryansk region with ATACMS missiles, or the Army Tactical Missile Systems, marking the first time these missiles were fired across the border. The Biden administration's significant policy shift prompted a response from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who on Tuesday signed a decree expanding the circumstances under which Moscow could use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear state, if that state is supported by nuclear powers. The US has not adjusted its nuclear posture in response to Russia's updated doctrine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his advisors are preparing for the possibility of a second Trump presidency, as the candidate has expressed criticism of US aid to Kyiv in the past. Bureau Report, DD India.
My colleague Jessica joins us live. Jessica filed this story a while back. Jessica, bring us up to speed with the latest on the developments that you brought us in your report. And also, is there any direct or indirect connection as far as the closure of the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv is concerned, and the fact that Ukraine firing the tactical missiles, U.S.-made tactical missiles into Russian domain?
Well, there has been an update recently where the United States has approved another military package of $270 million for Ukraine that would include munitions, also tanks, to further bolster support for Ukrainian military that is currently taking on Russia in the Kursk region, of course also targeting other areas where there is military incursion. Given that in mind, we also are getting to understand that the Americans have also provided anti-personnel mines, which have gained quite a lot of criticism in the recent past because of the usage of those mines and the fact that they would remain in that region for a very long time, and the kind of destruction it can lead to is by far questionable and quite lethal. So that has been the update in the kind of American support we've seen toward Ukraine. As far as the embassy concerned, we're also given to understand that many other embassies of the West have started, shutting down operations temporarily, or at least limiting their staff in their embassies. Those partners are, of course, also aligning their interest and, of course, looking at the threat perception at this point, where the Russians, on the other hand, have made it clear that targeting their weapons facility in the Bryansk region, which is almost 250 miles away from Kremlin, so quite close, is not going to be taken well. But what kind of response would it invite? One will only have to wait and see. But so far we've seen the Russian president has now changed the nuclear doctrine, or updated the nuclear doctrine to the effect that any attack on Russian soil by a non-nuclear state with the aid of a nuclear armed state would be considered a joint attack and would see a retaliation. But what would that retaliation be? Would it be now an escalation towards the nuclear front? One will have to only wait and see.
You spoke about the nuclear front. So it seems that President Vladimir Putin is clearly upping the ante when it comes to the nuclear spectre, so to say. What is the underlying message here?
Well, the new aid being given to Ukraine right before Donald Trump takes the presidency and he's sworn in on the 20th of January, and the transition period is on, the transition of power period is on. While President Biden had promised a lot more in terms of military aid to Ukraine in the recent past, but there was a lot of hesitation in terms of providing the ATACMS or the Army tactile missile systems, also because these are advanced missiles and can target deep into Russian territory, as it did yesterday when the missile launch was announced, although it was not confirmed by the Ukrainian side. But we do know from the Russian side that 5 missiles were struck down, and one, which we know, destroyed a small weapons facility at Bryansk. So the stakes are high, but when it comes to this further spreading into an out-and-out nuclear war, the chances of that are grim, because you hear from the Pentagon as well as the White House, they seem to believe that this kind of posturing has taken place in the past. There have been updates in the nuclear doctrine, there have been threat perceptions, but will it really culminate into reality?
Jessica, very quickly, we need to take a break here a little. So is this also part of the posturing or some sort of a psyops propaganda that some of the Western nations, with US taking the lead, shutting down their embassies in Kyiv? Very quickly.
Well, that's all for the moment. Everything understood through the lens of threat perception at this point. There are various narratives floating around, and it's difficult to sort of gauge facts from the kind of situation we've seen, on how things are becoming much more difficult to comprehend in terms of how the war will now escalate, and how the conflict would now take a different turn, because with these counter strikes and with the Russians also sending in drones towards the Ukrainian territory as you and I speak, it'll be slightly difficult to sort of comprehend on how that moves forward. But what we do know is there is no out-and-out nuclear war taking place in the near future, because we've been, of course, the threat perception remains, but I think it's limited to that for now.
Yes, let's track those developments in the next 72 hours, at least on that story. But Jessica Taneja, many thanks for joining us on that story from the newsroom.